So I just thought I'd give a quick update. I'm currently at Northwood Airfield in Essex. A couple of things have been going on. I've already mentioned about the domain name, that's still ongoing. We've got to the end of this week for interested parties to sort of come forward and show their interest. We've got a number of interested parties in that, and hopefully that will go well. I need to speak to my lawyers about anticipated fees and stuff. And I also had a chat with my business partner in one of the businesses about whether or not they're interested in taking on more of the shareholding than they currently have. And the reason why is basically when we were setting up the business initially, my view was that really, because I was not going to be active in the business, that my business partner should have the greater share of the business, particularly given like longer term. I know what running business is like, and I found myself in a really odd position of having to try and negotiate myself down, as opposed to the opposite. Normally it's like you're trying to negotiate more, get more shares for yourself than whatever, but they were like really adamant on more of a 50-50 split. Now, prior to that, I did actually also have a chat with my accountant and my lawyer. I tried to get my accountant to convince my business partner about it, and I think some of it came down to what I read from it was like they wanted to make sure that, I think it was something inside of them that they wanted to be able to know with conviction that they've built something that they can then buy back those shares at a later date. Now, I don't know if the sort of viewpoint has probably changed on that over time, because we're 3 years down the road, but they would only go ahead if it was a straight down the middle split, which is what we've done. I gave the option, obviously, to allow buying back only a small percentage of the company from me, and obviously I can do more if needed. But I think really the reason why I'm even saying that is that it's something you really need to think about if you're getting into business with someone, about clearly defining roles initially, which we did, with a very clearly defined shareholders agreement negotiated over a period of time. So there was never a concern over the negotiation of roles. You might want to think more about the actual shareholding, particularly if you are that person who's newer to business and you're getting someone who's got a bit more experience behind them involved, and effectively you're giving away a sweat equity, which is effectively that support and help that you need up front, that sort of mentoring and guidance to get started initially, if that's the sort of route you're going. Of course, there are other options you can, if people are willing, where they can actually operate the business alongside you to some extent or whatever, if that's how you're wanting to go. But in our case, it was more of a help at the initial point, get started up, get through that initial startup phase, get the initial clients onboarded, sort of help them get their confidence in place, where basically that they could then go ahead and run the business effectively, which is what the plan always was. So yeah, it's one of them things that you really need to consider if you are getting into business with someone. You might think initially, okay, 50-50 split sounds good, but later down the line, particularly if you are the one running it day to day and you're doing most of the work, a point will come where you might tend to resent that. Now, I haven't been told that they're resenting it. I'm just saying that I have a feeling that they would probably be more comfortable now, with hindsight, of owning more. And so that's why I had a discussion with them, and it seems like it's something they're actually quite receptive to, just not at the moment for their own reasons. But it's something to think about from the very outset. Now, in terms of clearly defined goals and sort of responsibilities, sometimes people are really reluctant to lay out the initial money to get a lawyer to draw up a contract for them. Now, there's a number of things that can happen, whether you're the more senior in terms of like experience from running businesses previously. There can definitely be issues with that, because if you don't lay out those terms initially and you've just got a verbal agreement that isn't really written down anywhere in terms of people's responsibilities and what they'll do for their shareholding or whatever, if there is any such agreement in place at all, it's not properly written, not properly documented by a lawyer, you're definitely going to come into problems later down the line. And you may find that one party who said they would do this, that and the other then don't end up doing what they meant to do, and you then start to resent it, and all sorts of issues can come along, which then ends up ultimately in the business failing. and that's not what you want. It doesn't help anyone by doing that. So if you are in that place, I would strongly suggest that you do seek proper legal advice prior to starting your business. If you are getting into shareholding with anyone, I don't care if it's your partner, you're the person you love the most in this world, because you don't know what happens 5 years down the line. And you can't just rely on the fact that, you verbally agreed certain things, because you can be sure that the other party's probably not going to agree to that. If it ended up in court or something like that later down the line, they're not going to turn around and be like, oh yeah, I did agree to give X, Y, Z or whatever. They could just deny it, and the onus is on you to prove it. That's my 2 cents worth. But anyway, look at the old warfighter there. There's 2 of them actually currently looking at. Tell me what you think about it. What's your experience been with getting into sort of business partnership with someone? This is actually my first one, to be honest. I've invested in lots of other companies, but as such a minority shareholding that it doesn't really matter. In terms of like a major shareholder, other than ones I own myself, this is my first one, so it's been a learning curve myself. But I think that if you are going through this right now, and particularly if you've got the business partner that you're with that is trying to negotiate themselves down in terms of the shareholding, I probably seek proper advice on it before you just are like adamant with, no, we need to have this equal split or whatever, just because you're probably going to regret it down the line. And I know that for my business partner, it's going to be an expensive mistake. Potentially, I don't have to see it as a mistake, but it's going to be an expensive lesson, let's say, where when they do buy back 5-10% from me or whatever it's going to be that we agree to, it's going to cost a lot more than zero was what it would have been like when we first started. So obviously time's gone by now and I've put in a lot of time into it, so it is what it is. And the shares have value now. They didn't really when it started. So yeah, that's it. Something to think about. Really something to think about. Don't be afraid of wasting that money on proper legal advice up front to make sure you've got everything ironed out early doors, because if you don't, you may find yourself in a situation where you've got litigation over disputes where it's really difficult for you either side to prove what has actually gone on, what conversations were, what was really agreed up front, and it's really taken out of your hands in terms of what the end result would be. If you are new to this and you've got someone who is definitely not new and they've allowed that to happen where you haven't got a shareholders agreement, personally I would be concerned about their motives, that they haven't insisted on a shareholders agreement. Because if they are someone who's done business multiple times with other people involved and stuff like that, then they've probably had experiences before where things have gone south and it can cause problems down the line, which they may very well be aware of, and maybe documenting things that you're not, and able to prove things that you're not able to prove because you weren't even thinking about it ahead of time. So yeah, that was meant to be a 30-second bit and it's ended up being 10 minutes, but I think it's really important. Okay, otherwise I wouldn't have spent the time doing this. Anyway, good luck out there. If you've got your business, you're getting a business, getting into a partnership. I honestly do think though, I personally think business partnerships are better. That said, I would caveat that business partnerships are better probably if both parties, like if you're both already kind of experienced in some way in business, I'd probably say it's better if both parties are bringing something to the table, whether it's money or, one's running the sales side of things, one's running the operations side of things or whatever. That's probably a better way. If you've got it where someone is purely an investor, or they're investing their time and knowledge and expertise up front that obviously you didn't want to pay for on like a consultancy arrangement, so you've come to an arrangement on equity instead, then just make sure they're clearly defined in terms of scope, what's expected of who, how that works and whatever. And if it is one of those arrangements where it is for sweat equity and you're effectively giving away shareholding in your idea, particularly if it's your idea and you want someone involved and it's sweat equity, for them to actually work their way into the business, then be really careful. Speak to a lawyer about that, because there can be ways that you can release that equity in stages depending on certain performance metrics being met over time, as opposed to just upfront releasing it all at once. That's not the situation with us. Ours is very different. It's very clear, defined up front, but be wary of that. If you are the person with the idea, you want to get this business started and you're trying to get someone else involved of that particular thing, because you could end up giving away a substantial chunk of your business to someone who is under no obligation whatsoever, legally speaking, to do anything for you, but you are legally bound to write them a check when you distribute your dividends if your business works out. Okay, so bear that in mind, and I need to go because I've got to go and view another property, and it's about a half-hour drive. Oh crap. Okay, I thought the minutes on the screen was the time. It's not. Thank you, because I would have been late. Anyway, bye.